Okay. We had mentioned before in one of the previous classes, that there is a whole slew of ideas which need to be understood in order to really be able to understand properly the deeper levels of meditation, and particularly Hasidic meditation. Now, when we say Hasidic meditation, it's not just, it doesn't comprise just one particular method, but in general, it's what I would like to call deep meditation. In other words, what it requires is really a sort of a journey into one's own depths. As we said before, there are 5 levels of consciousness, which are called the 5 souls, 5 levels of soul in Hebrew. There are Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. 5 levels of soul, 5 levels of consciousness, if you like. And each level of consciousness is aware of there's an object of consciousness or objects of consciousness called the world. So corresponding to the world of Nefesh, corresponding to the kind of level of consciousness called Nefesh is the world called Asiya. Corresponding to the level of consciousness called Ruach is the world of Yetzirah, Neshama, the world of Bria, Chaya, the world of Atzilus, or Atzilut, and ultimately Yechida is contemplation of and focusing on the essence of the divine, the essence of God. It's the essence of the soul, which is always bound up, united with the essence of God. And that is really the concept of deep meditation. The concept of deep meditation is really to bring to the fore, in whatever way is possible, the idea of Yechida. Now, the word Yechida itself means unity, oneness with God. It's the God consciousness, or consciousness of God, if you would like to put it that way. And that's all it's conscious of, nothing else, because the verses state, Ein od milvado, there is nothing else besides God. Yes, we have to understand what that means, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to actually look into a text that begins to explain this idea. And I say begins to explain the idea because it's a rather complex idea and takes a lot of study and a lot of thought and a lot of understanding and meditation to really grasp what it's all about, but we can do it at least to some extent. So, when that level of soul called Yechida, all it's aware of is God, so you may ask the question, then what's its function in this world? What's it doing in this world? Well, its function in the world is to, in fact, bring that revelation of God into the world, which is called in the lingo of Hasidic terminology, in the world of Hasidic terminology, that is called Dira La'asos Lo Yizborach Dira B'Tachtonim, to make a dwelling place for God in the lower worlds. In other words, the lower worlds themselves, which seem to contradict the whole concept of godliness, since the word Olam, world, is from the Hebrew root He'elem, concealment, i.e. that godliness is concealed. The lower the world, the more the concealment. The lower the world, the more the concealment. Therefore, you would think that in this world, godliness is completely or almost completely concealed, and that is true. And that's why the greatest service is really to reveal godliness in this world, which seems to be completely antithetical to godliness. That's the function and that's the mission, so to speak. However, there are 2 approaches. And the 2 approaches we mentioned last week is, one, meditation is on the concept of God is everything. And the other meditation is everything is God. Now, both of these are going to be discussed in one way or another in the text that we're going to be looking at. They're not discussed initially in the text that we're looking at, but we'll see later on that is in fact the subject of the text. The idea is that there is a creation in the world, and through contemplating the creation, the world that has been created, we can come to an understanding of the Creator. Now, when we come to an understanding of the Creator, that really is only the aspect of godliness that relates to a world at all. It's not God as he is in himself, so to speak, but only God as he utters the utterances which bring the world into being. The ultimate hitbonenut, ultimate meditation, is to contemplate God as he is in himself beyond the worlds and let's say rather before the worlds, on a level which is prior to any creation. So God within the world is called Yichudat HaTorah, the lower unity, and God which transcends the world as he transcends the world is called the higher unity. Godliness within the world is primarily reached by meditation on what is called Hashgacha Pratit, divine providence. And God as he transcends the world, or to put it even more correctly, as the world becomes completely nullified in the divine presence, is the contemplation of Ein Od Milvado. There's nothing besides him. Ein Od Milvado. Nothing besides him. So, what I thought we would do, and perhaps for the next several classes, if I don't have objections from students, is actually study a Hasidic text, but one that's translated into English, so we can study it in the English rather than the Hebrew, because there are probably a lot of you who don't speak Hebrew well enough to be able to, I could just read and translate, but since there's a translation in English already, we might as well read that. But like any translation, translations always lose something in the translation. The translation is a good one, but no translation can be perfect. And this translation, although it's accurate, tends a little bit to be, how shall we say, the language was translated in kind of, the text was translated in a kind of archaic fashion. It was translated accurately, but it doesn't flow as smoothly as you would want from a modern text. So it has the feeling of an ancient text, but that's the way the translator decided to do it. And I think he was probably right to do it like that, so that one will be able to follow the original Hebrew text with the English translation and figure out what means what. So what I'm saying is basically don't be put off by the imperfection of the language. Language is never perfect, and can't really be original concepts can't really be captured so much in language. The whole point is to transcend language in order to get to the original concept is not clothed in language. The original concept is not linguistic. The grasping thereof and the transmission thereof, the communication of the idea is through language. But language has to end at a certain point in time when the reality of the thing itself sort of takes over. And that which cannot be expressed in language is really the core of what this whole thing is about. Something that cannot really be expressed fully in language. Okay, so what I'm going to do, therefore, is I'm going to share a screen. And this screen here is the text. I can give it to you in the chat box as well, so that you will have, here we go. you'll have it for yourself, and you can. This is the work called Shar HaYichud VaHaEmuna of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. Rabbi Shneur Zalman Liadi. The link I just gave you is to chapter 1, and if you have a look on the screen now, let me just familiarize you with the with what's going on here. As you can see, there's links to chapter 2, chapter 3. It goes all the way through to chapter 12, right? So there's chapter 12 as well. The truth is an introduction before this as well, which I don't intend to read. It's worth reading, but nevertheless, we're not going to do it now. But it is the Shar HaYichud VeEmuna, which means the gate of unity and faith. The gate of unity and faith. Now, just to be to explain the title, what does it mean, gate of unity and faith? Faith, generally in Jewish terminology, really means two things. On the one hand, faith means that which cannot be understood by intellect after one has attempted to understand fully everything that can be understood. What transcends understanding, the vessel for that, or the handle for that, so to speak, is faith, emuna. So, things don't begin with faith in the same way that perhaps people have been taught, in the sense that you just have to accept things on faith that they are correct, because it's scripture. If you've ever seen a book of the Talmud, and there are many books of the Talmud, many volumes of the Talmud. There are 53 tractates, 60 tractates of the Talmud that need to be examined. All of the tractates of the Talmud, all of them are full of arguments. There are arguments about absolutely everything. Nothing is accepted on faith. You might have found Jewish people to be very argumentative in general. That's part of our heritage. We don't accept things on faith until we try and understand them, until we try and come to some perspective that's graspable in intellect. What transcends intellect and cannot be understood intellectually is where emuna, faith, begins. So that's one meaning of faith, transcending intellect. The other meaning of faith is really faithfulness. Faithfulness. It goes hand in hand with the idea of faith in the regular sense, because faithfulness means that even though there might be, it might be a rocky road here and there, even though we're coming to a bend in the road and I can't see what's around the corner, even though there might be ups and downs, nevertheless, there's a concept of being faithful, right? Faithfulness means that you work through it, through thick and thin. That's what it means. That's what it means to be faithful. So, emunah, belief in God, doesn't only mean belief rather than intellectualizing. It also means faithfulness. Very important concept, and very important in terms of proceeding to live the good life. When we say the good life, we mean the moral life, the proper life, the righteous life. The good life doesn't mean beaches in Hawaii, although those might be good too, but we mean it in a moral sense. Okay, so Shar HaYichud VeEmuna. Now I'm just going to read the text over here. The truth is you could read it for yourself, but just as a sort of a springboard to be able to explain the concepts. Not everything that he says here would I translate this way, as I mentioned before, but this is the way he does. That's the way we're gonna follow it. So let us understand, at least in a small measure, the statement in the Zohar. The Zohar, as everybody knows, is the classic statement of Kabbalah. It is the book that was written according to Jewish tradition by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and despite what academics say, their proofs are all basically very, very, very weak. As I show in my book, in the translation of the Zohar in the introduction, that many of their so-called proofs that the Zohar was of later antiquity, in other words, from about the 1300s, written by Moshe de Leon, is absolutely baseless. There's no basis at all to say that it was written by Moshe de Leon, and anyone who knows Kabbalah intimately, understands that that couldn't possibly be the case. It could not possibly have been written by anyone other than a Tana. Tana means one of the great authors of the code, which is called the Mishnah. The Mishnah is a basic statement of oral law in Judaism, and this could only have been written by someone who was on that spiritual level. Could never have been written by anybody else. And it takes an expert to know it. It takes someone who knows the teachings to be able to say that that is true. Just as an aside, there was a famous professor, Gershon Sholem. He was one of the people that, professor of Jewish mysticism in the University of Jerusalem. So he was one of these people that claimed that the Zohar was actually one of the main people that claimed that the Zohar was not written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, but was written by a much later sage, more than 1,000 years later, called Moshe de Leon. That Professor Sholem was once giving a lecture, and he was quoting from all kinds of very interesting and abstruse, not well-known sources, Kabbalistic sources. He had seems a photographic memory, and he remembered a lot of things, and he knew a lot of sources. Anyway, someone asked him after his lecture, which was a very interesting lecture, and said, Professor Sholem, you are obviously extremely knowledgeable in Kabbalah. How come that knowledge never changed you? And, how come you never sort of accepted it and it changed you to become a religious Kabbalist, as all the Kabbalists are, instead of just a scholar? So his answer was a very interesting answer. He said, you don't have to be a triangle to study mathematics. And it's true. You don't have to be a triangle to study mathematics. That's absolutely true. You don't have to be a country to study geography. I guess you don't have to be a playwright to study English. However, to study the Torah in the proper way, you do have to have the faith and the belief in the system. Otherwise, you're not in the system. You're outside of it. You're looking from the outside and you have no real understanding, which is the difference between some of the modern scholars of Kabbalah, one by the name of Moshe Idel, who's the current professor of Jewish mysticism in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and cut from a completely different cloth. He has very close ties to major Kabbalists and asks their interpretation of things all the time because he wants to understand it from the inside, not from the outside. If you don't live it, you can't be it. You can't really understand it. That's just the way it is. Just like ice cream, you can describe ice cream to somebody or a flavor or whatever it is to somebody, right? And you describe it for all you're worth, right? You can use incredibly descriptive phrases and paint a picture in front of him. If he's never tasted ice cream, he doesn't know what you're talking about. That's basically the bottom line. In any event, so the Zohar written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and he says as follows. The statement in the Zohar that Shema Yisrael, that's one of the prayers that we say in the morning, Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Right? That's that phrase. The Lord our God is Lord, the Lord is one, is Yehuda Ilah, the higher level of unity. And Baruch Shem, this is a misprint, Baruch Shem, that should be an M over there, Kvoi Malchusoi, Malchuto, Leolam Vayed, is Yehuda Tata'ah. Blessed be the name of his kingdom, or name of his glorious kingdom forever and ever. That is called the lower unity, Yehuda Tata'ah. Now he's just bringing this quote from the Zohar, and that's what he's going to explain. He's going to explain the higher level unity and the lower level unity, higher unity and lower unity. Basically, higher unity is how everything is nullified in divine existence, and lower unity, how everything in existence is empowered, so to speak, by godliness. Okay, so he's going to first explain the lower level unity. That's the way he starts. Excuse me a minute. Okay, so he says, know this day and take to your heart that Havaya is Elokim. These are two different names of God. Havaya, Yud-Kei, Vav-Kei, is Elokim. God is the Lord, as they translated over here. Now, what does that mean? It's actually a verse. Know this day and take to your heart that God is Elokim. In the heavens above and upon the earth below, there is no other. Now, what does this mean? First of all of the names in the Torah, all of the names of God that we find in the Torah are essentially designations of certain divine activities. Moses, when he first encountered God at the burning bush, asks God what his name is. This is a midrashic explanation. He asks God, what is your name, so to speak? And God tells him, Shmi ata rotze leida, my name you want to know, according to my deeds I am called. Lefi ma'asai ani ekra, according to my deeds I am called. So therefore, all of the names that we find in the Torah are names of certain types of activities. The name Elokim over here, is the name which is in Hebrew. The name Elokim is the numerical value of 86. Aleph Lamed, Yud Mem, Aleph Lamed, Hey Yud Mem, Aleph Lamed, Hey Yud Mem. Gematria, the numerical value. Every letter in Hebrew has a very numerical value. When you add up the letters of a word, that comes out to 86. And if I could just, for a minute, I will write this down over here now. I'm writing with a mouse and with the wrong hand. So just understand that it's not going to be great. Right? So that's 86. 86. Right? Now, the word for nature in Hebrew is hateva. Let me write that in English. 1 second. I'll just write it in English. Teva. I'm a strange kind of a person. I'm ambidextrous, but when I write with my right hand on a horizontal surface, I don't write very well. When I write with I can write equally well on a vertical surface with both hands, but on a horizontal surface, my right hand doesn't write too well. Anyway, hateva. So the word hateva, which means nature, is also the gematria, the same numerical value of the word Elokim, 86. Which means to tell you that the whole concept, the whole name of Elokim is associated with the creation of nature. It's associated with nature, the natural world, which is why that's the only name that is used in creation in the 10 utterances. The 10 utterances through which the world was created. The world was created through 10 utterances. Pirkei Avot, chapter 5. Ethics of the Fathers, chapter 5. So it says over there, the world was created with 10 utterances. What were those 10 utterances? The first utterance, Elokim, same name. God said there shall be light, and there was light. Let the earth bring forth herbs. Right? Let it bring forth the living soul. The soul of living animals, living creatures, and so on and so forth. All of the 10 utterances that are mentioned in the beginning of Genesis, the first chapter of Genesis, are all with the name Elokim. We only meet the later name, the name Havaya, the transcendent name, the name which shows the idea of transcendence. Now, transcendence is still not essence, but it's transcendence. We only meet that later on when the Sabbath is created and in the creation of man. In the creation of man and the Sabbath, then we meet this name, the transcendent name. So, know this day and take unto your heart that Havaya, that transcendent manifestation of godliness and the immanent, i.e. within nature manifestation of godliness, are the same thing. They're not two different gods, they're one God. It's one, so to speak, one person, so to speak, one God doing two different things. God being transcendent, the name Havaya, and God being immanent, the name Elohim, at the same time. They're not two different gods, it's all one God. So, God is the Lord. Lord being Elohim, and God signifying Havaya. Right? So, these two names are one. In the heaven above and upon the earth below, there is no other. There is only God, it's only one. So this requires explanation. For it occur to you that there is a God dwelling in the waters beneath the earth that is necessary to negate it so strongly as to say, take unto your heart, bring it down to your heart, know this day, take to your heart. So he's going to explain that later on, what this is all about. But the explanation really begins with the second paragraph over here. The second paragraph begins explaining this idea of immanence of God within the world. Right? God within the world, so that everything is God. Not God is everything, that's a higher level. Everything is God, that's the idea of Yehuda Tata'ah, the lower level unity. Everything that we see is imbued with godliness, otherwise it wouldn't exist. That's what he's going to say. So, let me just clear all drawings. There we go. So, it is written in Psalms, forever, O God, your word stands firmly in the heavens. This is in Psalms 119. Forever, O God, L'olam, it's like in the verse 30 something. No, it can't be verse 30 something. It is that would be 88, probably in the 90s, somewhere in the verse 90 onwards or whatever. Rather, chapter 119, verse 90, something like that, whatever it is. Or maybe it actually gives a reference here. No. Okay, so in any event, it's from Psalms. Forever, O God, L'olam Hashem, Dvarcha, your word, in other words, your words with which you created, with which you created the heavens. Your word stands firmly in the heavens. Now he's going to explain what this means. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidic teachings, Baal Shem Tov lived from about 1698 to 1760. The Baal Shem Tov of blessed memory has explained your word. What does your word mean? Your word which you uttered, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, let there be a firmament to divide between the upper waters and the lower waters. In other words, in the upper waters being the clouds and the lower waters being the water on earth. So that firmament that divides between them, in other words, keeps that water up there and this water down here. That word, these very words, and we'll explain why he uses this later on, why this is the example that he uses. These very words and letters of that statement stand firmly forever within the firmament of the heaven, and are forever, in other words, from the moment of creation, forever, and are forever clothed within all the heavens to give them life. In other words, the heavens wouldn't exist without this word being uttered all the time. This is a big mistake that people make. They think that the creation is a thing, a noun. It's not. It's a verb. Creation is a verb. It is a creating from moment to moment. He's going to explain this in great length. In this tractate, in this treatise over here, it's going to explain exactly that concept, that the creation is renewed from moment to moment and has to be constantly recreated. It's called constant creation. It has to be constantly created and recreated in order to exist. Otherwise, it would return to a state of nothingness. just like speech. And that's why the metaphor of speech is used in the Torah as the metaphor which explains how creation came to be. God said there shall be light, and there was light. It was all the utterances. God said. Vayomer Elokim, God said. Because when you speak the words, then they have existence. As you're saying the words, they have, the minute you stop speaking, the minute you remain silent, the words disappear. They don't hang out anymore, right? They're not there. Now, that's true of human beings. It's not really true of God. But the point that he's trying to make is that these utterances have to be uttered all the time, or it's not that the utterances enliven the world like a battery in a toy brings the toy to life, so to speak, right? Or a battery in a computer in a laptop brings the laptop to life. No, it's not like that. It's not that the word simply gives life to something, gives existence to that thing. So the word of our God shall stand firm forever, and his words live and stand firm forever. For if the letters were to depart, the letters of these words, the letters being the individual permutations of divine energy, which form a word, which form a particular creature. For if the letters were to depart even for an instant, God forbid, and return to their source, i.e., if God stopped speaking, all the heavens would become naught and absolutely nothingness. It would revert to absolutely nothingness. In order for them to exist, they have to be spoken into existence. And it would be as though they had never existed at all, exactly as before the utterance, let there be a firmament. And so it is with all the created things, in all the upper and lower worlds. And even this physical earth, which is the kingdom of the silent, the inanimate. In other words, this physical world is most of the world is inanimate. Rocks, metals, water, and so on and so forth. If the letters of the 10 utterances by which creation was created, not only the earth, but all of creation was created during the 6 days of creation, were to depart from it, but for an instant, God forbid, it would revert to nothingness, to naught and absolute nothingness, exactly as before the 6 days of creation. So that's what the Zohar says. That's what the Zohar is saying, and explained now by the Baal Shem Tov. The Zohar is talking about Yehuda Tata again, the lower unity, and what that means. The Baal Shem Tov explains that what it means is that our existence, the existence of whatever is, that we can sense with our senses, and so on, the existence of the universe and everything around us, that is a certain activity called speaking, which were God to cease speaking would cease to exist. Exactly as it was before the 6 days of creation. Well, let's just go a little bit further and we'll stop there. The same thought was expressed by the Hari, with Arizal, Rabbi Yitzhak Luria, the famous Kabbalist of the 1500s. The same thought was expressed by the Hari of blessed memory when he said that even in completely inanimate matter, completely inanimate, stones, earth, water, there is a soul and a spiritual life force. There is a spiritual life force in the thing. If the thing exists and has a spiritual life force in it, it's called, so to speak, not really, but so to speak, it's called the nefesh, the soul of that thing. Why so to speak? Because it's not conscious. It is a spiritual life force. It is a soul or a spark, if you want to put it that way, but not a conscious spark. So there's a soul and spiritual life force. That is the enclosing. That is the enclosing of the letters of speech of the 10 utterances which give life and existence to inanimate matter, that it might arise as the naught and nothingness which preceded the day of creation. So even in inanimate matter, in other words, there is a spark of godliness that brings it into existence. Were it not for that spark, it wouldn't exist. Okay. Much further do we have to go? I don't know if we should finish this now, if I've given you enough to chew on for a week or so. What do you all say? Anyone listening still?